Chapter 2. Not long after that, AJ came by one evening driving a horse and buggy he'd rented from the livery stable and called out, "Come on, old lady, we're taking a buggy ride." When we drove off, he told me he'd borrowed $20 and we were going to Sonora to get married. We ran into a friend and took him along to help get the marriage license and witness the ceremony. In our earlier acquaintance, AJ had noticed that I had exceptionally large feet, owing, I expect, to going barefoot as a child in the plowed field of our Iowa farm. I was always very sensitive about my big feet. AJ noticed this and during almost every visit would manage to ask, what size shoe do you wear?" I had also learned he was very sensitive about his age, so when he would ask about the size of my shoe, I would counter with, "How old are you?" It became a standing joke between us, with neither of us knowing the answer. The morning of the wedding, when the preacher handed him the marriage certificate to sign, he wrote in his age. Then he passed the certificate on to me to sign. Curiosity or some compelling force caused me to look at how old he was, and standing there before the preacher and the witnesses, he nudged me with his elbow and said, "Now, old lady, what size shoe do you wear?" I was never so embarrassed in my life, but I was learning fast that my new husband had individual ways of his own. There was never anyone like him. There was never anyone else like him. Right after the ceremony, as the four of us were walking down the street, we passed a grocery store that had a scales sitting on the sidewalk out front. AJ said, "Old lady, let's get weighed and see who's boss. The biggest man wears the pants." He stepped onto the scales and tipped them to 165 pounds. I tipped them at 168. I've been the boss ever since, but I don't think AJ ever knew it. Our marriage certificate was in book form with lovely wedding bells on it. The first of its kind I'd ever seen. Back in my home, everyone had their marriage certificate framed and hanging on the parlor wall. Once or twice a year, the parlor was opened and you could view the pictures along with the marriage certificate while sitting on the stiff black horsehair furniture. This new book certificate was much to my liking, for I could always keep it in my baggage, and I knew it would be some time before I'd have a home to hang it in. I was going to cherish that little book, but alas, I never got it. The minister had us sign it and said he would take it to the courthouse and have it recorded and then sent to us in the mail. In reading the early morning paper next day, my husband suddenly exclaimed, "Good God, old lady, we've killed the preacher!" The minister had taken the certificate to the courthouse, had it recorded, and then dropped dead on the way home. We never got our certificate, but we found that it was recorded in the courthouse in Sonora, where, if we ever needed it, we could get a record of it. Then began a series of moves from one mining camp to another. We went from California to Oregon to Arizona to Nevada. These moves lasted for the next 12 years, for, with all miners, the hills are greener far away. The distance of our journey depended entirely on the size and fleshiness of our purses. Our life reminded me so much of Charles Dickens' description of the Micawber family in his book David Copperfield. I also saw the movie and felt so sorry for Mrs. Micawber, who, with each move and each new baby, looked more worn, more pale and discouraged. Only in our case, it was my husband who looked discouraged and toil-worn, for our moves and our babies both came often. Early in our married life, my husband developed what was known as silicosis. What is now known as silicosis. Then it was simply miner's consumption, as the miners glibly called it, miner's con. AJ, whom I now call Daddy, and a friend of his always joked about their miner's con and what nice-looking young widows they were going to be leaving. But with me it was no joke, because I became discouraged seeing my poor, tired husband looking for a job. which he knew in advance he had neither the health nor the strength to hold. By this time we had 5 children and no money, but I had almost superhuman health and strength. I began looking for something where I could help make a living. By 1907, we were living in Reno, Nevada, and had been for the past 2 years, our longest stay in any one place. Daddy had obtained a little one-horse transfer outfit, but his health had failed till he wasn't strong enough to do even that. We were living on the outskirts of Reno, where we had 2 cows, 150 chickens, and a big garden. I sold milk, eggs, and some garden stuff. Of course, this all helped, but it wasn't enough to make a complete living. I wanted a ranch, and how badly I wanted it. Having been raised on a farm in Iowa, I felt instinctively that if I could only get a ranch, I could make a living for our little brood and give my dear AJ a chance to rest. The doctor had told me 2 years before that only rest, fresh air, and sunshine would ever do him any good, for he was beyond human help. With no money, how was I going to get my ranch? I kept looking and kept faith that something would turn up. Something did, in a most unexpected way. Daddy's nephew by marriage, Hiram West, a young cowboy, had homesteaded out on Tool Mountain, 35 miles north of Reno. There were droves of wild horses roaming over the Nevada hills. That was before the government hired men to go out and rid the range of wild horses, which the ranchers claimed depleted the range of grass. And even worse, when they turned their blooded broodmares out, they said the mares were always bred to wild stallions instead of to the blooded stock, making their offspring almost worthless. High's only means of support was to break wild horses, gentle them, and sell them in Reno. He had about 5 acres of grass fenced around his cabin and a big stockade corral built to hold a group of wild horses. In talking to High one day, he told me of a piece of vacant land adjoining his on the south, which interested me very much. But how was I going to get Daddy, who was never a rancher, to Homestead? This was quite a problem, but again, something told me to have faith, and if it was the right thing to do, a way would open up. In talking to Daddy about ranching, he always expressed his opinion. A ranch is a place where you have to work 16 hours a day and wear patched overalls. I thought a ranch was a place where one could make a living in God's fresh air and sunshine. Again, our difference of opinion. My friends were all advising me to apply to the county for help. They said, with an invalid husband and all those little children, the county would readily help us. That idea didn't appeal to me. There was no organized relief at the time, for which I'm thankful to this day, for if there had been, I might have accepted help, and I'd always had a horror of being an object of charity. After my homesteading talk with High, I didn't let the idea get out of my mind. He told me Tool Mountain was the greatest game country ever laid out of doors. There were droves of deer, literally thousands of sage hens, coveys of mountain and valley quail, and doves galore, some cottontail, and of course the much despised old jackrabbit. All this added fuel to the homesteading scheme, which was fast developing in my mind. My biggest problem was getting AJ interested enough to file papers on a homestead. I could just hear him saying, "Why, old lady, you're crazy. It simply can't be done." However, my idea persisted, and my thoughts were steadily forming. Daddy was quite a sportsman and liked to hunt and fish when he was able. That was my trading point. I now planned a hunting trip with High. He was to get Daddy to go hunting with him on Tool Mountain. The plan worked like a charm. Daddy went hunting with High and came home so enthused with his success. Why, he could shoot sage hen right out High's front door, and he went on to tell me about all the other game that abounded out there. High wanted a neighbor, and was almost as enthusiastic about my homesteading plan as I was. He told Daddy of some land open to homesteading, and stressed the abundance of game and good trout fishing in the nearby Pyramid Lake. By the time they returned from their hunting trip, Daddy was all pepped to go out there and homestead. I didn't let any grass grow under my feet in encouraging him to go to Carson City and file the papers. I had triumphed easily over my first stumbling block. Never had a scheme worked so smoothly. It was the greatest piece of strategy I'd ever managed, and Daddy never realized it. All that fall and winter we made great plans for the homestead in the following spring. Daddy said he would build a cabin, a kind of hunting lodge where he could go in the summer to rest, hunt, and fish when he was able. But he didn't include me in any of his homestead plans. I was to stay in Reno and run our chicken ranch, small as it was, and the dairy route from our 2 cows. I readily agreed to all his plans, but insisted that the cabin must have 2 rooms in it. One bright spring morning, Daddy, with another old broken-down miner, whom we always seemed to help support from our meager income, borrowed a team and a wagon and bought enough lumber to build the cabin. Away they went in their first venture at carpentry. I had drawn the plans for the cabin, confidently knowing I would soon occupy it. It was to have 2 good-sized rooms, 12 by 14, and a small extension on the back, 6 by 8, for a pantry and clothes closet. During the winter, I had managed to keep away $150, which was to build the house. When he returned from building the house, only then did I announce that I was going homesteading too. Great as Daddy's consternation and many were his objections. "Why, you're crazy, old lady. It can't be done. What in the hell could you do out there with a bunch of little kids?" I came back with, "What could you do out there without me?" He was searching his mind for objections, anything that would keep me from going out there. He finally hit upon a good one, an idea that almost wrecked my plans and really looked insurmountable. "You simply can't take 5 little kids 35 miles from a school." That stumped me. I knew it was all too true.